What's better than a custom Brad Pitt movie car in 143 scale? A bigger 124 scale version. Let's see how to strip and convert a standard issue diecast into a custom race car and driver from the F1 movie. G'day everyone, we're back to a custom diecast conversion for this video, and this larger model is an even better example of the APX GP movie car. Just like the 43rd scale version, it started with a standard issue Red Bull RB19 diecast from Bburago, plus aftermarket decals or decals. This was the Sergio Perez version and included a driver figure. First step, strip the model, but there's a bit more to it than the smaller version. A bunch of screws hold the model together, so they all need to come out. But if you're tackling this project yourself, take note that they are not all the same. A couple of them are quite different and obviously have to go back into their original positions. Also, many of the plastic parts are clipped into place, so pay attention to the disassembly sequence for later on. You will need a narrow flat blade screwdriver to push on the little plastic tabs to release the parts like the halo and the engine cover. Overall, there are many more parts than the 143rd scale version, which means much more decoration has to be removed to make way for the black and gold APX GP livery. The only diecast part in the model is the main body piece. It's straightforward, standard paint stripper brushed on, left for a bit and then scrubbed off and washed under running water, and then just a fine pick in a couple of the panel lines to get the last bit of paint out. Lacquer thinner on a cotton tip gets the printed decoration off the model, being careful not to go too aggressive to damage the plastic. Signage and logos had to come off the front and rear wings, the halo, barge boards and even the rim edges, which is why the tyres have been removed. The metal body and plastic engine cover were lightly sanded, and I also filed down some casting burrs in the metal before it's all primed with Tamiya grey primer. Body colour is Tamiya TS14 Gloss Black, and this went on all the body panels but not the main floor piece because I wanted to retain Bburago's really nice carbon fibre look. Something I hadn't considered was, on the Red Bull model, the top of the rear wing has a carbon texture moulded into the plastic, but on the movie car it's smooth. So this meant sanding the texture off the top surface, and this turned into quite the job due to the complex curvature of the wing. After various grades of wet sanding, the wing was masked up, ready for gold. Now I decided to mask and spray all the gold sections, so before the body could be masked up, the engine cover and various pieces that make up the side pods had to all be held together. The white is a plastic tape that can stretch and go around corners, and then just the standard Tamiya masking tape to cover up the rest. Same deal with the nose, and then we fired up the airbrush with Tamiya TS21 Gold, which only required a couple of light coats and all in the one sitting. Nervous times pulling the tape off, but the gold came out really well and there were no bleeds. The only flaw was a very small misting in the recess of the engine cover, which was easily fixed with a little polishing compound. While the model is still in pieces, it's a great time to enhance the detail of several other parts. The hand grips, knobs and switches were picked out in colour on the steering wheel. Some flat black was added to the seat to differentiate it from the belts. And SMS steel colour was sprayed on the exhaust pipe to add to the realism. The job I was most concerned about was applying the decoration, or more specifically, where the decoration would even fit, because this was all unproven. The aftermarket decals are made up from a computer game, not a model car, and I had no idea if the dimensions from that digital platform would correlate to a toy Red Bull in 124 scale. Also, all the big decals had to fit over several parts, meaning the model had to be partially assembled first. The livery pattern and sign writing on the top and sides of the cockpit is one big decal, and this took a lot of time and patience and cutting and manipulating to get it to sit down and clear and tuck under the suspension arms and the camera pods. Decaling process was the usual, cut it out around the edges, a little warm water to soften it, a drop of microset onto the model surface, and then slide the film off the backing paper and onto the model. Use a wooden toothpick to push it around into place, and then a bit of a dab with a cotton bud to remove any excess liquid and basically just wait for it to properly dry out. The ones that were over curves or panel lines also got some microsol to help soften them further and help them to settle down. The side decoration is cut into multiple pieces before application. The pattern is not a good fit and it's out of scale with the rest of the model, so breaking it up like this allows the various pieces to be positioned independently, and I think this offers the best compromise without harming the overall look too much. Once the decals were dry, the rest of the model could be assembled, and that's pretty straightforward, providing you haven't mixed up all the screws. Tyres popped back on the rims, and the wheel nuts were given some metallic colour to reflect how they look on the movie car. Because the model had to be partially assembled to get the big areas of the decoration in place, it presents a problem when it comes to the pilot tubes and aerials on the top of the cockpit, because they're supposed to fit into the model from the inside. So these parts had to be fitted to the outside, which was achieved by cutting off the mounting bases, trimming them to the size of the original hole in the diecast, and then white gluing them in place. Now, the donor model came with a driver figure. Figures and people are not my thing, okay? But I wanted this to at least look something like Sonny Hayes, the character Brad Pitt plays in the movie. He's made of a bit of a weird material, sort of feels like a flexible rubberish plastic, and I couldn't remove his head or the hands device to paint them separately. I initially primed the figure with grey, but then used white as that more or less matches the race suit colour. For the helmet, I eyeballed a mix of Tamiya's coral blue and pure white. Once that had hardened, remasked for the centre stripe, which is just gloss black. The aftermarket decals for this project did not include any driver markings, so I decided to have a crack at making my own. I manipulated some logos and signage I found online, and using my existing inkjet device, printed onto some clear decal film that I bought off eBay. Once the ink had dried, they were sealed with some clear, which was just a light spray of Tamiya TS13 straight from the can, before each of these was cut out and applied to the model. The driver has ended up quite bare because I couldn't get the clarity required to bother with the smaller logos, and there's also some black panels missing off the suit, but at least he no longer looks like a Red Bull employee. A piece of black water slide was cut to shape to represent the visor. Again, this is inaccurate, as in the film, clear visors were used for the cinematic reason of showing the actor's face. Then Sonny was finished off by hand, semi-gloss black on the hands device, matte white boots and gloves, and some flat black on the cuffs. Enjoy looking at the finished model. The 43rd scale version came together quite differently, so if you're interested in that, there's a link in the description. Cheers.